On June 25th, 1996, multiple explosions would destroy the Khobar Towers in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, killing 19 American soldiers and wounding over 500. Saudi officials will later interrogate the suspects, declare them guilty, and execute them without letting the FBI talk to them. Saudis will later blame Hezbollah, the Iranian influence group, but U.S. investigators will still believe Osama bin Laden had been involved. U.S. intelligence would be listening when al-Qaeda's #2 leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, called bin Laden 2 days after the bombing to congratulate him on the operation. The New York Times will report that Marmoon Darkanzali, a suspected al-Qaeda financier with extensive ties to the al-Qaeda Hamburg cell on September 11, 2001, is involved in the attack. Bin Laden will later admit to instigating the attacks in a 1998 interview with Peter Bergen. Ironically, the Bin Laden's family construction company will be awarded the contract to rebuild the installation. In 1997, Canada will later catch one of the Khobar Tower attackers and extradite him to the United States. However, in 1999, he would be shipped back to Saudi Arabia before he could reveal what he knows about al-Qaeda and the Saudis. One anonymous insider will call President Clinton's parting kiss to the Saudis. In June of 2001, a U.S. grand jury would indict 13 Saudis for the bombing. According to the indictment, Iran and Hezbollah were also involved in the attack, even though there was no evidence to suggest they were. June 25th, 1996, in the wake of the Khobar Tower bombings in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi government continued to stonewall the FBI about their knowledge of radical militants in the country. Official inquiries about bin Laden would go unanswered, and the Saudis gave no help to a U.S. probe about the bombing. But often, the U.S. does not even ask the Saudis questions for fear of upsetting the Saudi government. Former U.S. officials will later claim that even after the bombing, the CIA instructed officials at its Saudi station not to collect information on Islamic extremists in Saudi Arabia. It is not known how long this policy would continue, but there is evidence it continues until 9/11. In August of 2001, former CIA agent Robert Baer will attempt to give the CIA a list of hundreds of al-Qaeda operatives in Saudi Arabia and Yemen, but the CIA will show no interest in it. 15 of the 19 9/11 hijackers reportedly come from Saudi Arabia. In 1999, a retired CIA official will claim that 2 days after the Khobar Towers bombings in Saudi Arabia, bin Laden is congratulated by colleagues about the bombing. Both Ayman al-Zawahiri, head of the Islamic Jihad and al-Qaeda's #2, and Ashra Hadi, head of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, are monitored by the NSA, as they call bin Laden, due to the fact that the NSA had long tapped bin Laden's satellite phone. This helps confirm that bin Laden was being monitored while using his first satellite phone. It will be widely reported that he was monitored after he started using his second satellite phone later in '96. Bin Laden does not exactly publicly take credit for the bombing, but later in the year, he would say, "When I got the news about these blasts, I was very happy. This was a noble act. This was a great honor. But unfortunately, I did not conduct these explosions personally." On November 23rd, 1996, Abdel Badi Atwan, editor-in-chief of the British-based pan-Arab daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi, travels to Afghanistan to interview Osama bin Laden in the mountains of Tora Bora. The interview is arranged by Khalid al-Fawaz, bin Laden's representative in Europe, in which Fawaz also would hand bin Laden his second satellite phone, which was purchased in Long Island. Atwan travels secretly to Peshawar, Pakistan, where he meets a representative of bin Laden. Then, dressed as an Afghan, he crosses the border with a series of guides and travels to Jalalabad in eastern Afghanistan, where he meets al-Qaeda manager Mohammed Atef. Atwan is then taken up to the mountains to the Eagle's Nest base, where he meets bin Laden. Atwan first meets him sitting cross-legged on a carpet and a Kalashnikov in his lap, and they chat informally and then have dinner. Bin Laden would make a number of comments during the 2 days, saying he had no fear of death. He still controls significant sums of money. The U.S. military presence in Saudi Arabia is wrong, and the Sudanese government treating him badly over his recent expulsion and their non-repayment of funds invested in Sudan which totals to over $60 million. He also talks of his time in the Sudan and Somalia, as well as attempts on his life and bribes offered to him to toe the line by Saudi intelligence services. In addition, he claims responsibility for the Black Hawk Down incident and the Khobar Towers bombing, and says other operators are in preparation. Atwan also notes that one part of the Eagle's Nest has computers and internet access, although this is not common in 1996. April 13, 1999, a 2005 U.S. indictment will reveal that two employees for a pro-Israeli lobbying group had somehow obtained classified U.S. information about al-Qaeda and was passing it on to Israeli officials. The two employees are Stephen Rosen and Keith Weissman. Both work for the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. On April 13, 1999, Rosen gave Rafi Barak, the former deputy chief of mission at the Israeli embassy in Washington, what he calls a code word protected, extremely sensitive piece of intelligence about terrorist activities in Central Asia. On June 11, 1999, Weissman tells Barak about a classified FBI report on the 1996 Khobar Towers bombing, which had been blamed on al-Qaeda and Iran. In retrospect, FBI officials will determine that some, but not all, of the classified information comes from Larry Franklin, a Defense Department analyst on Iran, known to be in favor of a tougher U.S. policy regarding Iran. It is not known how or why U.S. surveillance of Rosen and Weissman began. However, there may be a connection to an early investigation. In 1997, the FBI monitored Naor Gilan, an official at the Israeli embassy in Washington, as part of an investigation into whether U.S. intelligence officials was illegally giving U.S. spy plane film and other secret material to the Israeli Mossad. The U.S. will later accuse Rosen and Weissman of passing classified information given to them by Franklin to Gilan. In any case, the investigation will continue and grow. National Public Radio will later note that from 1999 to 2004, Franklin, Rosen, and Weissman had regular discussions about the Middle East and about al-Qaeda with a variety of contacts. The Khobar Towers bombing was one of the incidents which came up in audio. October 10, 1999, the U.S. deports Hani el-Sayeg, a Saudi national who is also a suspect in the Khobar Towers bombing. The deportation is approved by a U.S. judge. In 1996, el-Sayeg, who had been living in Iran, moved to Kuwait. He later went to Canada, where he cut a deal with American officials that called for him to plead guilty in an unrelated plot against Americans in Saudi Arabia that was never carried out. But after arriving, he said he had not understood the accord, knew nothing about the Khobar Towers attack, and was out of Saudi Arabia when the bombing occurred. Despite this, the Saudis suspected him of being present at the bombing, and his brother was held in connection with it and allegedly tortured in a Saudi jail. Immediately after the bombings of the Khobar Towers, the U.S. military intelligence community came under heavy criticism for their lack of preparation and foresight for what was considered an intelligence failure. According to the New York Times, significant shortcomings in planning, intelligence, and basic security left American forces in Saudi Arabia vulnerable. Numerous warnings have been made available to the intelligence community and military command, and up to 10 incidents were reported suggesting that the Khobar Towers are under surveillance from April to June of 96. These warnings came both before and after the beheadings of 4 Saudi nationals after their publicly confessed role to the November 1995 attacks in Riyadh. Clinton administration officials admit that they received a wave of threats against Americans and American installations in Saudi Arabia in the weeks leading up to the attack, but failed to prepare adequately for a bomb of the power that killed 19 American military personnel. Threats were also downplayed by the Saudis when Defense Minister Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz Al Saud characterized acts carried out by Saudi Islamic jihadists in 1995 as boyish and stated that the Saudi kingdom is not influenced by threats. Senator Arlen Specter commented during a Senate Intelligence Committee meeting by saying there was no intelligence failure. There have been more than 100 intelligence reports on alerts of a general nature and were very specific reports of an extent and present threat to the Khobar Towers complex. The CIA was blamed for misjudging the bomb-making capabilities of Saudi militants, arbitrarily deciding that no bomb could exceed the size of that used in the November 1995 bombing in Riyadh and the one used in 1996. The main security concern at the Khobar Towers compound before the bombing had been the prevention of an attack similar to the 1983 Beirut barracks bombings when a vehicle bomb entered the compound itself. Yet the Pentagon's report from the incident suggested, as did the Khobar report, that a Beirut-sized bomb would still have caused significant damage from as far as 300 feet away. A 3-year investigation that led the FBI to conclude that Iran was involved in the attacks was also contradicted by a smaller faction within the FBI, stated that Bin Laden had been the primary suspect. At the time, the Clinton administration hoped to have open a dialogue with reformist President Khatami, which would be impossible after accusing Iranians of supporting terrorist action. A secret letter delivered directly to Khatami by Sultan Qaboos of Oman stated that the United States had evidence of direct Iranian involvement in the act and demanded that those involved be held responsible for their actions. Khatami refused to begin an investigation, and Iranian officials stated that al-Qaeda was responsible for the attack. In June 2001, an indictment was issued by the United States District Court of the Eastern District of Virginia, charging that the following people with murder, conspiracy, and other charges related to the bombing: Ahmed Ibrahim al-Mughasali, Hanan al-Sagai, Ali al-Hordi, Hani al-Sayeg, Ibrahim al-Yaqub, and Abdel Qasim el-Nasser. In July of 2001, Saudi Arabia said that 11 of the people indicted in the U.S. were in custody in Saudi prisons and were to be tried in Saudi court, as the country refused to extradite any of them to the United States to stand trial. The government had not since made public the outcome of the trial or the whereabouts of the prisoners, although the FBI suspected that the Saudi government had executed all of them. Admiral Bari Atwani, the editor of Al-Quds Al-Arabi, would later write, quote, "In May 1996, Bin Laden and his entourage moved from Sudan to Afghanistan, as if to make the point that they might have been chased out by Sudan by Saudi Arabia under the influence of the CIA, and that the U.S. were not leaving with their tails between their legs. Al-Qaeda had struck again. The June bombing of Khobar Towers, the Saudi authorities were at pains to implicate Shiite militants backed by Iran in this attack, since the embarrassing truth that they had their very own homegrown militancy problem was inadmissible. They did not want to give the impression that there was a domestic opposition to the deployment of U.S. troops on Saudi soil." End quote. The problem stands with the United States partnership with Saudi Arabia, in which the FBI and domestic intelligence agencies such as the Israeli Mossad, who know about previous attacks, collect evidence, collect pre-intelligence, and not share them with important U.S. officials, in which protection and security measures can be taken place. The blame lays on the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel in their continued effort to continue this abhorrent partnership between the three, while militancy and terrorism besiege the citizenry and the U.S. military, in which terrorist attacks like the Khobar Towers can take place without any prevention methods whatsoever by the intelligence agencies we entrust to protect us. It's high time the United States start looking inward and then outward to see if our allies are really our enemies.